Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. We got some signings to talk about, injury updates, a couple of waiver updates, plus some trade rumors involving the New York Rangers, Vancouver Canucks, Pittsburgh Penguins, Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, and Nashville Preds. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey channel. Now before I begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you all your support. We'd never be able to without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. And if we will comment down in the comment section below, something else listen to today's video. So in today's video, we'll start off with some signings from our past couple days. Only one signing to talk about here. It was a low end one, and that was that the Blue Jackets signed 31-year-old AHLer Joe Labate to a 1-year, 2-way deal with AV $675,000 for the rest of this year. So Labate has been mostly an AHLer over the past couple of years. He spent last year in the KHL, putting up 8 goals and 18 points in 49 games. Before that, he played in 53 games with the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, putting up 22 points. So far this season, he's played in 5 games with the AHL affiliates for Columbus, putting up a goal and 4 points. Doesn't look overly bad, so Labate looks like a pretty serviceable AHLer. Could maybe be a call-up option if the Jackets run into some major injury problems. Just a pretty good pickup there for the Jackets. He does have 1 year of NHL experience back in 2016-2017 with the Vancouver Canucks, when he had no points in 13 NHL games, so he does have a tiny bit of experience, but it's been years since he's been in the NHL, so not too surprised there. It's a solid depth addition there for the Jackets. Could help them in the AHL. It's another healthy body they have in the AHL if they run into some injuries. So interesting note there. But the Jackets have signed Joe Labate to a new deal. That's the only signing we've had from our past couple of days. We'll go over to the injury update now. So lots of interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. First, we'll start with the St. Louis Blues. Pavel Buchnevich left Wednesday's game to not return after suffering a lower body injury. That's a bad blow there for the Blues. Buchnevich is a solid top 6 forward, so if he's out for any extended period of time, that's going to be a major blow for St. Louis. Well, Philip Broberg was active off injury reserve and should get back in game action on Saturday, so that's pretty good news there for the Blues, as Broberg, who's been something in the last 11-12 games, is a fantastic top 6 forward there for the Blues. So good to see him probably be back on the weekend, but bad news to see Buchnevich out. Brian McMahon left Wednesday's game with a lower body injury. He's uncertain for Saturday's game, so bad blow there for the Leafs as they could lose McMahon for the next little while. But Austin Matthews has been activated off of injury reserve and should get back in game action on Saturday, so really great news. That's going to be a massive boost for the Leafs to get Matthews back, so good news there. But bad news on McMahon for the Leafs. Colorado has placed Miles Wood on injury reserve, and he's going to be out at least next week with upper body injuries, so it's a bad blow there for the Avalanche. Well, Oliver Kylington didn't play on Friday and is dealing with an injury, so as they're starting to get some more injuries on their team right now, as Wood and Kylington are both out with injuries. San Jose placed Barclay Goodrow on IR with upper body injuries. There's a bad blow there. Solid bottom 6 forward, veteran leader on that team. Bad blow to see him go. Philip Hronek will be out a while for the Vancouver Canucks with an upper body injury. It's a bad blow there for the Canucks. Hronek's a solid top pair defenseman there for the Canucks, so hopefully he returns in not just in future, but it sounds like he might miss at least a couple of weeks. So bad blow there for Vancouver. Owen Pickering missed practice with an illness, and he's questionable for the next couple of games for the Penguins. So bad blow there for the Penguins. As Pickering, who's one of their top prospects, who's gone into some NHL games this year, is out with an illness right now, so that's a bad blow there. Sam Ersson misses 8th straight game on Friday with a lower body injury as he continues to deal with his lower body injuries, so bad blow there for the Flyers. Ersson's been a really good player there for the Flyers, a really good goaltender there, so to see him still be out is bad news. Anthony Duclair starts skating by himself, which is very fantastic news for the Islanders, but he's still out with his leg injury and will probably miss another couple of games, maybe a week or 2 with his injury, so bad blow there. But at least he started to skate, so that's really great news there for the Islanders to see Duclair starting to skate again. Chris Kreider and Filipino both missed Friday's game with upper body injuries and remained out, but they could be back as early as Saturday, so bad news to see them miss yet another game. I think it's 5th or 6th straight. Kreider's 2nd or 3rd, but still good news to see them potentially be on track to return on Saturday, so that's what we can see on that. Akil Thomas was placed on injury reserve for the LA Kings with undisclosed injury, and he's going to miss the next couple of games for the Kings, so bad blow there is Thomas, who's been a solid in and out forward. He's been a healthy scratch at some points. He's been a solid bottom 6 forward at some point, so bad news to see him go down with an injury, and hopefully he returns not just in future. Sam Lafferty left Friday's game with a lower body injury and didn't return to game action, so Lafferty might miss some time for the Buffalo Sabres, so that's a bad blow there for Buffalo. Chicago's Laurent Brossoit had a 2nd knee procedure. He had one in the offseason. He's apparently recently just had one, and he's going to be out at least a month and a half for the Chicago Blackhawks, so bad blow there for the Hawks. They're not going to get Brossoit back until at some point in the new year, probably late January, early February, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but bad blow there as the Hawks remain without Brossoit for the foreseeable future. Roope Hintz has returned to to game action after missing 1 game. Nils Lundkvist returned to game action after missing 3 games. Hintz with an undisclosed injury, Lundkvist with a lower body injury, and both will return on Friday. So great news to see Lundkvist, who's a decent third-pair defenseman, and Hintz, who's their top-line center, back in the game action. So really great boost there for Dallas to get those two guys back on Friday. Utah's Maverick Lamoureux is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body injury, so it's a horrible blow there for Utah, as Lamoureux, who's called up due to the injuries to Marino and Jersey, is not going to be out for a while. But Bertuzzo, who did leave Tuesday's game, is all right and got back in the game action on Friday. So good to see Bertuzzo's back, but a bad blow there to see Lamoureux go for the next little while. Victor Olofsson was recalled from his conditioning stint, but is still out with a lower body injury. He should be able to get back in the next game or two, hopefully, for Vegas, but that's really good to see him recover from his conditioning stint. Winnipeg's Logan Stanley was activated from injury reserve and got back into game action after missing 8 games with a mid-body injury. So great news there for the Jets, as Stanley was able to get back. He's a solid third-pair defenseman for them. Vic Arvidsson didn't travel with the Oilers on their current road trip, so he'll miss at least the next 3 games with his undisclosed injury, so it's a bad blow there for the Oilers. Pyotr Kochetkov is doubtful for Saturday's game, as he's still in concussion protocol, so it's a bad blow there for the Hurricanes, as they may still be without Kochetkov for the next game. And Columbus's Igor Chinnikov missed Friday's game with upper body injury in his day-to-day, so it's a bad blow there for the Jackets, as Chinnikov, who's been a solid middle 6 forward this year, is currently injured, so interesting note there. But those are all the injury updates from the past couple of days. So good to see guys like Stanley, Hintz, Broberg, and Mathews all got back into game action. Hopefully they don't look too rusty in their returns. But bad news to see guys like Buchnevich, Hronek, Lamoureux, and Lafferty all be out with injuries, and hopefully they're not going to be out for an over long period of time and do well in their recovery time. So lots of interesting stuff there, but that's all the injury updates from the past couple of days. 2 quick waiver updates to talk about here. First, a couple of days ago, I think it was back on Wednesday, we saw Calgary Flames place Elliotte Nikolayev, who's one of their prospects, on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. Nikolayev, I guess, didn't feel like he was getting the best of opportunities in the Calgary's AHL system. The Flames felt it was time to part ways, so they placed him on unconditional waivers. Thursday came around, he cleared unconditional waivers. So not exactly sure where Nikolayev will go from here. He's now pending UFA, so he probably will go overseas, could maybe sign somewhere else. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But Nikolayev and the Flames will part ways after he was placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. And then the new signing that we just talked about, Joe Labate, was placed on waivers after the signing. Remember, after players sign and need to be sent out to the AHL, they need to go on waivers. So not too surprised here. Like we said, Labate's mostly an AHL player, except for that one stint a long time ago in Vancouver. So I would expect him to probably clear. Not exactly sure at the outcome of it at this point in time, but Labate probably would clear, in my opinion, given the fact he just came from the AHL and given the fact that he's more of an AHL player at this point in his career. So I think Labate probably clears, but he has been placed on waivers, and we'll have to wait and see on if Labate does clear or not. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But those are 2 waiver updates for the past couple of days. Elliotte Nikolayev was cleared with unconditional waivers and is now a UFA after he and the Flames apart ways, while Joe Labate, who's recently signed with Columbus, is on waivers and will probably clear, in my opinion. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now, when it comes to the trade rumors, we've got a couple of things to talk about here. First, we're going to talk about the Nashville Predators. Elliotte Friedman was recently doing a radio hit. I think it was on the Hockey News, it might have been on something else. And he was talking about Nashville, saying that he feels that something's going to have to give in the not-too-distant future for Nashville. He says that the Preds are currently in the market trying to look for some way to sort of reshake up this roster to try and kickstart some sort of a spark on their team to try and get back into the playoff race. They have not an overly great start to here. I think they're sitting at like 7 or 8 wins on the year. They're second to last in the Central, only be ahead of the Blackhawks, and I think they're only ahead of them by like 1 point. I'm not even sure if they've hit the 20-point mark yet, so Preds not having an overly great season. There's still some talk out there that the Preds are looking for a top 6 center. They're looking for a top 4 defenseman. They could also be open to moving some pieces. We just seen them recently move off guys like Philip Tomasino as well as Scott Wedgwood. So it wouldn't be overly surprising if we saw them continue to move off some pieces, especially pending OFAs. So the Predators will probably make a move in the not-too-distant future, trying to upgrade something like a top 6 or the top 4 on the defensive end. Elliotte Friedman does point out that it's still very hard to make a trade this early into the season, and the teams might try and make good on Nashville's need to try and make some sort of a change to try and take advantage of their situation right now. But Elliotte Friedman does think that there needs to be some sort of a change for Nashville in the not-too-distant future because it has not gone overly well, and that they are probably looking to try and make some sort of move. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Predators are very likely to make a change. Not sure if they'll be selling off a big piece or if they'll be trying to acquire something that'll help them not only for now but in the long term. Elliotte Friedman also says that they're still looking for some younger players to try and help get faster. He says that they could definitely use some more speed. They're a very slow team. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there for Nashville. but very likely chance that we see the Predators make some moves and not just in future. So you're going to have to wait and see on that. Going over to Ottawa Senators, Anthony DeMarco was talking about this on a recent blog post I think he did on the Daily Faceoff, talking about 4 names in Ottawa that we could see in the rumor mill in the not just in future and that he thinks could very likely get moved. Now the 4 names he mentioned, remember I'm a Senators fan, so I'm not going to agree with all of this, but he thinks that Pinto, Greig, Chabot, and Batherson are potential trade candidates for the Senators. Now I can see a couple, I cannot see a couple. Pinto's been in the trade rumor mill for a little bit. Now, with the talks of Norris being potentially moved, put up by Frank Saravalli, I would think Pinto's very unlikely to get moved, especially if they were to move Norris, because Pinto can be that second-line center. But if they do want to try and keep Norris, maybe they consider moving Pinto. He's a solid third-line center, but they have a lot of really good center prospects on that team that could be third-line center. So if he was able to help them get a defensive upgrade, I could potentially see them move Pinto. He also mentions Ridley Greig. I would say no. Greig's been a fantastic addition to the Ottawa Senators team. Great top 9 forward. He could potentially even take the third-line center role from Pinto or Norris if one of those two are to be traded. I think Greig could be a fantastic 3C for that Senators team. So instead of potentially moving on from him, I think they should try and keep him. But DeMarco mentions him as a name who could potentially, in his eyes, be on the trade market. Thomas Chabot's name was coming up a lot last year, and that was basically because they had 3 left-shot defensemen in Sanderson, Chabot, and Chychrun, and the one of Chabot or Chychrun were going to get moved because they weren't moving Sanderson. They couldn't have 3 top 4 left-shot defensemen. So after the Chychrun trade, that sort of died down, and it sort of seemed like Chabot was more likely to stay. And Chabot's actually had a pretty decent season, so it wouldn't make too much sense if they're looking for a top 4 defenseman to move off a top 4 defenseman. But DeMarco notes it would represent a major shakeup, so it could make some sense, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if they try to keep him. As for Batherson, if I'm the Senators, I don't move him. Batherson's over a point per game. He's cost control for next 2 seasons. That would make him a really intriguing trade chip because a lot of teams would probably love to have him. But if I'm the Senators, I'm not moving him. Batherson's been a fantastic top 6 forward for the Ottawa Senators. He's cost control. He's really good. He's over a point per game. I would try and keep Batherson instead of moving on from him, but DeMarco thinks there's a possibility that with Batherson only a couple of years away from pending UFA status on a cost control deal and how well he's played, he could also be a potential trade candidate too. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Personally, I think you could potentially move Chabot or maybe Pinto. I would definitely not touch Greig or Batherson. I think both those guys are staying in Ottawa for the foreseeable future, but I could potentially see Chabot and Pinto. But DeMarco links Greig, Pinto, Chabot, and Batherson as potential trade candidates for the Ottawa Senators. We're going to have to see on that. Next, going over to the Vancouver Canucks, Kevin Weekes recently put out a tweet. We know that he has a lot of inside information, so he mentions on his tweet over on X that Nils Hoglander's name that's picking up steam, and that the Capitals, Penguins, and Blue Jackets all have some major interest in Hoglander. Now, Hoglander has not had the best of starts to the season for the Canucks. He's been bouncing around the lineup, but he's sometimes been the 3rd line, sometimes been on the 4th line, sometimes been on the top line. Still really hasn't been able to produce as well as he did last year, but still, he's still trying to find his new role on the Canucks team. Hoglander signed a 3-year, $3 million extension just before the season started, so he's signed for this year, I think, at a $1 million cap hit, plus the next 3 years at $3 million AAV. So it would make some sense as to why some teams would have some interest in him. They know he's going to be signed for at least the next 3.5 seasons. He's on the younger side of things. He's had some really good seasons scoring. I think he had 20 goals last year, or just over 20 goals, and most of them are on 5-on-5. So he's shown that he can be a really good goal scorer. He just might not be the right fit for the Vancouver Canucks. So Capitals makes some sense. They want to try and get to younger. They want to try and add some more pieces around Ovechkin for the next couple of years. So Hoglander could be a really good fit there. I know the Pittsburgh Penguins are looking for some young players to try and help them get through this sort of rebuild. We know they've said that they value young NHL players as a top priority for them. So that could be a really interesting one. And we know that the Jackets are looking for some more healthy bodies up front. Hoglander is on the younger side of things, could really fit in well with that core, and could also be a really solid top 6, top 9 forward in that Jackets team. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but Kevin Weekes does think there's a very likely chance Hoglander might get moved. Now, Hoglander signed for 3 years at $3 million. The Canucks might not want to move him, but there's definitely some teams who have some interest in him. And if there's an offer that the Canucks can't refuse, maybe he gets dealt. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but Hoglander's name has come up in trade rumor talks. We're going to have to wait and see if Hoglander potentially gets moved at some point by Vancouver Canucks. Next, going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins, Montreal Canadiens. Now, Elliotte Friedman was recently talking, and he was just spitballing. He says that he's not sure if they've even had talks or anything surrounding this, but he mentions Kirby Dach as a potential really good fit for Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, I know the Penguins are looking for some younger players. I know they've made that a top priority. We just mentioned that with Hoglander. So they would love to acquire prospects. They would love to acquire draft picks. But they've made young NHL players their top priority so far right now. And Dach would make some sense. You know, Penguin scouts have recently been scouting Canadian games. We talked about that in our last video. So could that be as a potential lead up to a Kirby Dach deal? That would be a possibility. Now, Dach's not had the best of years in Montreal. He's had, I think, 2 or 3 years now in Montreal. He's been injured a lot. And I think he's currently the 4th line center on that team. So he's definitely fallen down the depth charts and he's not producing an overly great pace. So could he look for a fresh start? It's possible. I think Dach's signed for 1 or 2 more seasons left at like $2.5–3 million. So he's cost controlled. He's a really good young forward. He's a really good big center. He could work really well with a guy like Evgeny Malkin or Sidney Crosby on like the top pair or the second line, or maybe even center his own line on the third line. So it's going to be interesting to see, but that could be an interesting option there for the Penguins. I think that could be a really good fit there and sort of fit what the Penguins are trying to get and sort of a deal. Now, what the Habs might want if they were to move a guy like Kirby Dach, I'm not exactly sure. We know that the Habs are looking to move off some forwards because they have some guys like Harvey Pinard and Laine who should be in the lineup and not just in future. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Would they move Dach? I'm not exactly sure. And if they do move Dach, they'd probably want something like a second-round pick and really good prospect in return. So we're going to have to wait and see on what happens there. But Elliotte Friedman says that a name that could really help out the Pittsburgh Penguins is Kirby Dach. And even though he doesn't think that they have been talking or anything yet, he does think that there's a very likely chance Dach could be a really good fit in Pittsburgh. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, could J.T Miller wind up going back to where he was drafted in New York? Arthur Staples recently an article talking about this, and he says that he's heard from some league sources that the New York Rangers have inquired with the Vancouver Canucks about J.T. Miller. Now, Miller was originally drafted by the Rangers, spent his first few years in the New York Rangers organization. He was then moved as part of the major Ryan McDonagh deal to the Tampa Bay Lightning. He spent a couple of years in Tampa, did all right as like a solid second, third line player, was then traded to Vancouver for a couple of draft picks, I think it was. And after arriving to Vancouver, he's been a phenomenal player, been consistent 80, 90, 100 point player. He's been a really good point driver there for the Canucks. They signed to an 8-year, $8 million deal, valued him over Horvat, so they really liked him. But earlier this year, he's not the best of starts. He had a slow start. He was benched early in the year. Now he's out for personal reasons, and he's out indefinitely. So could a fresh start in New York maybe help him? It's a possibility. Now, I'm not sure if the Canucks really want to move Miller. He's still a really good piece of that team. He's a veteran leader at that point, so I'm not exactly sure if they really want to move on from him. And 2, they'd have to have a major return. Like, I'm thinking they would probably have to have a return of something like maybe Capo Caco, one of the young Ranger defensemen, and probably another draft pick or something like that if they were to consider moving J.T. Miller. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it does seem that the Rangers have some interest in trying to reacquire J.T. Miller. And whether the Canucks pull a trigger on a Miller deal or not, we'll have to wait and see, but I would probably think that the Canucks don't move Miller at this point in time, but who knows, maybe if his absence is long enough and it doesn't seem like he really wants to return to Vancouver, maybe he gets dealt to a team like the New York Rangers, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all I want to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Do the Rangers try and acquire J.T. Miller, and if so, could the Canucks try and pull off a deal? Do the Penguins try and target Kirby Dach, and if so, if there was a trade, what sort of return could the Habs get? Do the Canucks wind up moving Nils Hoglander, and if so, what sort of return could they get for him? What do you think about the Ottawa stuff and the Nashville stuff? Does Ottawa move one of those 4 players that we talked about? And can Nashville make some sort of trade not just in the future? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus the waiver updates, injury updates, and signings from the past couple days. Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. We're going to this video. If you're liking, remember to subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're new to love you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't leave a comment down in the comment section below so you can also listen to today's video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll leave links in the description below. And I'll see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.